Hi booktube, Aaron here. I hope you're doing really well. Today I'm going to be wrapping up everything that I read in, what month are we now? In October, and I'll go through some of my November reading plans. Before I get into the individual books, I thought I'd sort of check in on a couple of the projects I've been doing this year. So there are two kind of challenges that I've been setting myself. One is an alphabet challenge. So I'm seeing how many letters of the alphabet I can sort of tick off with the authors that I'm reading. It was only until today my wife mentioned to me that I don't have to limit this to this year. I can just see how long it takes me to actually have an author for every letter of the alphabet, which does sound quite fun. So I think that's something I might consider. And I'm also just for fun as well, tracking the sort of countries represented and the languages represented. So in terms of letters of the alphabet, I think by far the most popular is B. We've got two Brontes in there. We've got two Brownings in there. In fact, no, we've got all three Brontes in there and two Brownings. We've got Isaac Babel, Thomas Brown, Borges, William Blake. So there's quite a lot of people hanging out there. S is also quite popular. We've got William Shakespeare, George Saunders, Maria Stepanova, W.G. Sebald, A. Starlings. And then P is doing okay. We've got Fernando Pessoa, Sylvia Plath, Marcel Proust, Plato, and H as well. We've got Hafez, we've got Hemingway, we've got Ted Hughes, Tom Holland, Susan Howe. A few letters of the alphabet seem to be attracting more authors. At the moment, the letters that still I don't have any authors representing them, they would be I, Q, U, V, X, and Y. And so I don't know when I'll manage to do that. But there's still a few letters that are waiting for authors to fill them up. And then in terms of countries represented, it's still the UK and the US which are in the lead. The UK has 21 authors represented, the US has 16. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the authors have to be from there. It's more that maybe they were there when they were writing that particular book, or they kind of made that country their home. I'm not really being super strict or picky on that kind of thing. And so there are writers from the UK or the US who live elsewhere, and so they count for other countries. But then there are like W.G. Sebald, who writes in German. He still spent a large part of his life in the UK, and when he was writing the books he's famous for, he was living in the UK, and so I've classed him as UK, but then in terms of the language, he classes as German. And actually, when I go over to the languages, German is quite a funny one, because there are 7 authors or 7 sort of instances of me reading books that were originally in German, but only 3 books from sort of long-term residents of Germany. And so there are sort of, Germany seems to be that country where I've got authors from sort of quite a few different places writing in that language. I've added on Persia and Greece in the last couple of months to countries represented, and Persian is the kind of only new language in there. But so far English is running away really with 10, 20, 30, with 42 books. And to say I think I've read 76 books, so it's over half, but there's still a fair number of books when you think about it that I've read so far this year that are translated from other languages. So I'm quite happy with that. I'm quite enjoying that, and the more I read that's translated, the more intrigued I am, just by other cultures and other places. But we'll see where that goes in the future. To dive into what I read in October, I finished 7 books in October, so that's very good. I didn't do any sort of random reading updates because a lot of the month was really just spent reading one thing. So a lot of that number was actually from poetry books. I was quite enjoying reading poetry this month, and I managed to get through a couple of them quite quickly. So that's why I think I managed to finish 7 books instead of just 2 or 3. And so I'm going to try and not spend too much time on each individual books. I'll start off with the poetry. So there are, I think, 5 poetry books represented. The first of which was Sailing the Forest. So this is the selected poems of Robertson. And I really quite liked it. It's one of a couple of poetry collections that I read this month where right at the beginning I was really loving it and thinking I'd found a new favourite poet. Towards the middle I was kind of less keen. There are a few things in here that just felt a bit gratuitous on his part. But other than that, I do like the kind of sparseness of his poetry. His poetry about mythology is really good, and there are a few poems that are quite violent and make your skin crawl with just the certain details that he decides to kind of highlight. But I quite liked it. So not an all-time favourite, but a poet I'm sure I'll be revisiting in the future. And then it was Victober, so a month dedicated to reading Victorian literature, and I didn't really focus on any of the prompts that they had, but I read this little pocket edition of poems written by Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and I really liked it. That they're definitely 2 poets that I want to read more by. I do have more by Robert Browning on my shelves, not too much more by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, so I might try and find some more Elizabeth Barrett Browning in the future. The sonnets from the Portuguese were, I just really loved them. I think I said at some point during the month, just after I'd finished reading them, that they kind of gave me shivers, some of them. They seemed really they seemed really honest. They were, they're a little sentimental, and yet they're also very aware of death and of the kind of fleetingness of what they're celebrating. So I thought they were brilliant, and much deeper than I had originally thought they would be. So yeah, 2 poets that I'll be looking out for a bit in the future. Then next up was Henri Cole. I felt like reading something a bit more modern, and this is Nothing to Declare. So a relatively recent collection from him, I think, from about 2015. I think, 2015, and a little bit like the Robin Robertson poems. The first couple of poems I really quite liked. Both quite different poets. Henri Cole's poems, they felt quite quiet and relaxed, very much kind of early morning poems, and very observational, kind of quotidian poems. But yeah, after a while, I thought they're okay. They just weren't really blowing me away. But yeah, I'll still try some other collections by him. Because I get the impression this collection was a bit of a departure from the kind of style he'd been developing in the collections just before this. He'd been writing lots of sonnets and things like that, and then he'd sort of moved to a kind of sparser, freer kind of poetry in this collection. So I might try some of those sonnets and see what they're like. And then I read Songs from the Gallows, or Galgenlieder by Christien Morgenstern. These were translated by Walter Arndt. And these are like nonsense poems, translated from German. And they were really, really fun. They did kind of get samey, so I think it is one of those books that it is more fun just to open onto a random page, and you will be surprised, and it'll be odd, and it'll be weird. As an overall reading experience, found it to be a little samey. A lot of them have the same kind of rhythm and the same kind of sort of aura around them, but still a lot of fun. And a lot of the poems have a kind of surprising kind of metaphysical twist. I think Morganstern was like a theosophist or something like that, and so he was sort of quite interested in sort of spiritual things, I think. So he sometimes kind of shoehorns them into these weird sort of nonsensical poems. So it was fun, and it certainly I don't know, kind of gave my reading that month a bit of a jolt into a different direction, which was a lot of fun. And then just today I finished reading Across the Land and the Water, the selected poems of W.G. Sebald, which was, I really quite like these. I don't think I quite like his poetry as much as his prose, but I think one of the blurbs here sort of points out that reading these kind of makes you realise just how poetic his prose is. But certainly a lot of his preoccupations that you might recognise from Vertigo or the Rings of Saturn turn up here. There's lots of travelling. There's lots of random figures from history and chance meetings with strangers that are kind of catalysts for different trains of thought. And so, yeah, I did like it. Particularly liked his poems in here about trains and waiting around at train stations and stuff. Maybe just as someone who spends a lot of time on trains and has spent a lot of time waiting at train stations. And then I finished 2 novels, and the first one is the book that I just spent the best part of the month reading. It took up the best part of my headspace, and it's totally justified. It was The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I was reading this along with Anne and Bella, and it was a really fun experience. It was Anne's first time reading it. It was my second time, and Anne was reading it in a Dutch translation. I was reading it in English, and I think we're both sort of picking up on some kind of different details, and the bits that were in French. Anne was able to read in French as well, so she was able to pick up on some of the nuances. And luckily for me, a lot of the French in this edition, which was translated by John E. Woods, was translated into English, so I could get the gist of, I could actually get into, the specifics of what they were saying. Whereas the last time I read it, I was just getting the gist, just getting the general outlines of the conversation, which is really, really cool. And I think I said in a video I made recently, I was seeing echoes of that conversation that was in French come back later on in the book, which were kind of marrying these ideas of love and death together, and the kind of attraction this character has towards a certain character is almost like his attraction to death. So yeah, I really loved it. There's so much in this book that you can just pick up. You can go down so many different rabbit holes. Summer from Sterling Reads has just picked this back up after putting it down for a little bit, and she noticed something I didn't really notice about the number 7 turning up all the time, and the kind of significance of that number, and and all kinds of stuff. So it's a book that you can just keep coming back to and getting more out of. But as well, just the atmosphere of the book is great. It's just a great place to be. The characters are endlessly fascinating, and I enjoy hearing them ramble on and argue and make mistakes. And so, yeah, this is probably one of my all-time favourite books. And I really need to read something else by Thomas Mann now, since this is all I've read by him so far. So eventually I'll read something else by him. And then the last book I finished, or the last of the novels, was Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. So I wanted to read something else for Victober. And since reading The Tenant of Wildfell Hall back in I think June or July this year, I wanted to reread the other biggies from the Brontë sisters, so Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, just to see what I thought of them. After having finished Jane Eyre, I think it's fairly safe to say after finishing Wuthering Heights, it's fairly safe to say that I think Wuthering Heights is my favourite. But I will try and read Jane Eyre. It'll probably be next year now, but while the other two are relatively fresh in my mind, just to see what I think. I just love the atmosphere of this book. I kind of quite relish how horrible the characters are to each other. Maybe relish is the wrong word, but it provokes a very strong reaction in me that kind of is repulsion, but is also a kind of fascination at the same time. And also I just have a profound sympathy for quite a few characters in this book as well, particularly Histon, who is pretty much everybody treats him terribly, and so I almost shed a tear towards the end when it seems like things might be getting a bit better for him. So yeah, I'm trying to remember when I did the Victorian literature journey tag. I think I said I'd never shed a tear. I almost shed a tear for Histon when I read Wuthering Heights. And that's everything I finished. There are a few things that are I'm still kind of in the middle of, that I've been slowly making my way through. A project that I've been working on since I suppose the end of August has been slowly making my way through the Divine Comedy. So I'm still in the Inferno, but I think I'm up to Canto 31. So I've only got 3 more cantos to go. I think it's 33 per place. Oh no, there we go, 34. So I got a little bit to go. So by the end of this week or beginning of next week, I will have finished the Inferno, and I'll be moving on up to Purgatory. And it's been really fun. I've been going slowly, and haven't really been making any extensive notes, but I've just been trying to let it settle and trying to work out what I think about each canto, which isn't particularly profound, but I've been enjoying it nonetheless. So yeah, I've been really enjoying this. And then after I finished Wuthering Heights, I just settled into some short stories, and I've just kept on picking up Chekhov. So I've been making my way through this. So this is The Lady with the Little Dog and Other Stories. So stories from 1896 to 1904. It's sneaky. It's got basically a novella right in the middle of it, called My Life, which I really quite liked. Sort of found some parallels between that and Jude the Obscure, I suppose, about someone. Well, this story is about someone who comes from a very privileged background, but he finds no real kind of honour or fulfilment in sort of middle class work. He finds it very mechanical and uninspiring, and so he prefers manual labour, so he worked on railways. He works as a painter and as a labourer, and yeah, it's just about how difficult his life becomes because of that. I actually really quite liked it. I also quite liked A Visit to Friends. That there are quite a few stories in here that are about kind of past relationships and seeing how they change through times. That kind of quite quite melancholic but somehow heartwarming kind of thing. So I've been enjoying this, and I've just got 3 more stories to go. I've got Disturbing the Balance, The Bishop, and The Bride. So I expect I'll have finished this before the end of the week as well. But yeah, I've been really enjoying it. Definitely seeing parallels between these stories and some of his plays, particularly the idea of that haunting feeling that you've been wasting your life, which is really present in Three Sisters and Uncle Vanya, and yeah, so I've been really enjoying Chekhov, and then I haven't made much progress, but I've still been sort of dipping in occasionally to the House of Government. This is a massive brick of a book, and it's a saga of the Russian Revolution. It's by Yuri Slezkine, and it's about it really is about the Russian Revolution, and it's using it's using a particular building kind of tell its story, or he's seeing this building as kind of being the embodiment of the revolution, of its ideals, but also some of the contradictions and compromises that kind of had to happen. So it's been really interesting, but I am only, so I'm on page 357, and the building has only just been built. So I think I'm only just really getting into the the heart of the story that he's telling, or what he kind of wants to focus on. But yeah, I've been enjoying it, and I just have to dedicate a lot of time and sort of concentration to it. So I'm sure I'll still be reading this in the new year. And then also, I've just been the last few days just occasionally dipping into this, which is 20th century French poems, edited by Stephen Romer, which is what it says on the tin. And I've just been reading recently poems by Raymond Roussel and Apollinaire, and who else? We've got Paul Valéry, and a couple of others. But yeah, I'm about 20 odd pages in, and I'm just sort of keeping this around just to pick up at random, just when I'm in the mood to for a change of tone. And that's it. That's everything that I have been reading or have read. And then I've got a little pile of books here of things for November. As I said, I'm likely to be finishing Inferno in the next few days, and so I'll be moving up to Purgatory, so I'm looking forward to that. And it's the same translation, so it's the J.G. Nichols translation. Yeah, I think it'll be good. From last time I read the Divine Comedy, Purgatory was my favourite part, so I'm kind of looking forward to it. And then in November this year, we've got a brand new reading event called Dr. November, which is a bit of a focus on espionage fiction, particularly surrounding the Cold War or the kind of Soviet era, so sort of roughly the 20s through to the 90s. And really the king of that is John le Carré, and so I'm going to read a couple of John le Carré books in November. So I've got The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and I've got Call for the Dead. And I know that The Spy Who Came In From the Cold is the sort of group read for the event, so I'll likely start with this and then might follow up with this if I'm still in the mood for sort of espionage stuff. If I finish them, and if I'm in a mood for short stories, I'll likely pick up Rashōmon and 17 Other Stories by Akutagawa. This was something I kind of wanted to dip into in October, and I just didn't get to it. Chekhov kind of got in the way. But I would still really like to read this. I've read like the first few pages of the first story, and yeah, I think I will enjoy the writing style and the mood. But I think once Chekhov's out of the way and I've made some progress in Dr. November, I think then that'll be a good opening for Akutagawa. And then I think in November I'll be wanting to kind of change the pace in my poetry reading, and I think instead of reading loads and loads of small collections, I'm just gonna try and start working my way through a big collected volume. And so I've got the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, and I don't know, I think sort of autumn, kind of feels like, it seems like it suits Whitman really well, and so yeah, I'll try to read as much Walt Whitman this November as I can in the fog and the sort of crisp mornings. And then the last thing I've got here, and this is something I'll be starting towards the end of November, and that's Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. And this is a selection for Classics and Company. So from the second half of November through to the end of December, they're reading Anna Karenina. And if my experience is going to be anything like my experience with War and Peace, I think I'm going to really enjoy it. And so that's kind of why I haven't gone too overboard with what I've got down for reading in November. Although I'll only be picking this up at the end of November, and I'm going to take a similar approach just to December and just have a couple of slim books to read, but I'll be kind of focusing on this. And I should say Classics and Company is an event that was created by and sort of run by Anne Novella and Micah Cummings, and they have loads of great sort of co-hosts for each month to talk about each book. So I'm excited to see what kind of discussion sort of develops when it comes to Anna Karenina. And I should also say, actually, with the House of Government, that I kind of shoehorn that into a couple of reading events. So there's Historathon, which is a year-long reading event focused on non-fiction history. That was created by Vin from Revenant Reads. Again, there are loads of great co-hosts, and that's been one of my favourite things this year for sort of reading events and getting me to read in slightly different directions. And so that kind of fits in with the period that they're covering from the late, sort of the end of the Napoleonic era, so the sort of mid 19th century to the present. And so since the House of Government sort of spans the 20th century, it's quite comfortably in that period. But it also fits into non-fiction November as well, which I believe was created by Olive from a book Olive. And so I can kind of tick those off as well and say that I'll be kind of participating in at least 4 events, I suppose, in November. So there we go. That's everything I read, everything I'm planning to read, and a bit of a ramble too. So business as usual, really. So thank you very much for watching. I hope your October has been lovely, and yeah, I'm wishing you the best for the coming month. Take care, and thank you for watching. Bye.